again, and welcome in the midst of our heat, excessive heat these days. And let's keep praying for those who are fighting and those who are affected by the multiple fires around Victoria, New South and South Australia. This morning, what I want to have a look at with you or listen to with you is Mark's version of the parable of the sower, or as some say, the parable of the seed, or others, parable of the soil. And Mark tells us that Jesus came to the lakeside, and there was a large crowd of people there. So, as not to be crushed, he got into a small boat and had the boat just offshore, and the people were standing around the shore. And Jesus sat down, which, as we know in Mark, that means to teach. And Jesus says to the crowd, "Listen." And that is part of the theme right through this parable. Listen. And he says, imagine a sower going out to sow. And some of the seed he scatters falls on the edge of the path. And the birds come and eat up the seed, and it produces nothing. And some other seed falls on rocky ground, and that springs up quickly. But when the sun comes up, it scorches it, and it dies and produces nothing. And more seed falls among thorns, and they grow up together, and the thorns choke the seed, and it produces nothing. But finally, some seed falls on good soil, and it immediately takes root, grows, and produces 30, 60, 100-fold. Listen, you who have ears to hear. And then later on in the day, when they are together, just the disciples and Jesus, the disciples ask him, "Lord, would you explain the parable to us?" And Jesus, as is typical in Mark, throws his eyes to heaven and says, "Oh, will you ever understand any of the parables?" And then he explains. He says, the sower who goes out to sow is God. And the seed that he scatters is the word of God. And the word that falls on the side of the pathway and is eaten by the birds is the people who don't even listen, but are not touched by, are indifferent to the word, and they produce nothing. But then the seed that falls on the rocky ground, they are the people who receive it with joy. But when trials or contradictions or difficulties come, they give up and don't produce either. And then, of course, those who fall among thorns. The thorns grow up with the wheat, and the thorns choke the wheat, which means the people are obsessed with concerns of the world, with money, with fame, with success, with acceptance, or with pleasures, and they don't produce either. But then those who are the good soil, those who listen to the word of God, who accept it, who embrace it, and allow it to speak to them, to affirm them, to encourage them, to guide them, they produce 30, 60, or 100-fold. And I took this parable not only because it's today's Mass, but also because during the month of January, Pope Leo had a particular petition or request for which he invited the whole Church to pray. And that is that the Word of God would be accepted, listened to, and would nourish them. And that was his prayer for the whole Church, and the whole Church also prayed for that the Word of God, as we have it in the Bible, but most especially in the Gospels, would be allowed into our lives, into our hearts, and be able to nourish us so that we might live better. And that was consistent with Pope Francis, who also in his beautiful encyclical, first letter of his, The Joy of the Gospel, spoke of how the Word is an invitation. The Word is offered to us. The Word is present if we will only listen to it and accept it. And I think that's what Jesus is saying in the Gospel, what Pope Francis and then Pope Leo are saying. Listen to the Word of God. It's an offering. It's a gift. And it's present amongst us. Okay, so give yourself the chance. Open up one of the Gospels. Mark is probably the easiest. Luke is probably the most sentimental. And Matthew is probably the one that mostly follows the life of the church. So if you get a chance, have a look at one of the Gospels, and as Jesus says, listen to it. Okay? God bless. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.